Hello and welcome back to our latest and greatest edition of Better Together Arizona. Super excited today to talk about Proposition 137, which is the end retention elections for the state Supreme Court justices. With me is Tom Collins from the Arizona Clean Elections. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
At Local First Arizona, we know the power of coming together to make a difference. Whether you're a small business owner or a loyal customer, your voice counts. Visit Your Vote Is Your Voice today to register to vote and to learn more about the upcoming elections.
I'm excited to talk about this proposition because I know it's getting a lot of interest from Arizonans.
Sure.
So before we dive into it, this is a change to the Arizona Constitution.
It is. Yes, this is going to be a change how we retain judges, and it actually goes. It's state Supreme Court, state appellate court, and Superior Court judges in counties over 250,000 residents.
So this proposition is that's the overview that
Yes.
it would purport to.
That's right.
Got it. Talk about what this proposition wants to do.
Sure. So since for about 50 years in Arizona, we have had state level and in larger counties, Maricopa, Pima, Pinal, in particular, we have had what we call merit selection and retention. So merit selection means that in order to get on the bench in those counties or at the state level, you're going to go through an application process and you get reviewed by a commission that's appointed by the governor. And that commission is looking at judges for their experience and their character and all these things. And then that commission then presents to the governor a list of nominees that the governor picks from. Then what voters get to do is on the back end, every 4 or 6 years, depending upon how long what station, the station, Supreme Court have a different term than Superior Court does.
Okay.
Voters get a chance to vote up or down on whether to keep those judges. Part of that you'll see in your publicity pamphlets from the Secretary's office is all those reports from the Judicial Performance Review Commission. That's a commission that provides some information to voters about how those judges are doing. And so that's the compromise. And the compromise when this was developed was that we had direct judicial elections at the state and the county. So the trade-off then was struck was we want to have, instead of elections, we want to have this merit selection. That's why they use merit, is the idea of we're going to take that out of the political realm. But in order to keep some voter control over this, we want to have this retention election on a regular basis. This bill says we should go a different direction, and it says basically that we should, instead of this regular retention election, we should be looking at this somewhat like the federal system in the sense that judges would generally serve as long as they're on good behavior up until the retirement age.
So merit is what's going to matter.
Yeah,
based on this, on this proposition, right? That it's about merit.
That's the theory, right? So you're taking it out of you're to eliminate the retention election so that instead, if a judge, judges retire here at 70, so that's one difference with the federal system already. That's kept in place. But if you really needed to, get if you really wanted to have a judge disciplined, it would go, either you could file a complaint or, in fact, a lawmaker could file a complaint with a commission. And that could lead to a retention election if there were...
To a judge potentially being removed.
That's right, by a vote of the people. But this would be a particular judge who has been, identified as having, violated some rule.
Based on merit, essentially, right?
Right. Yeah. The theory here, right? Like, for example, if they had a retention election would be in the case of, for example, if a judge has not met judicial performance standards. We talked about those standards
earlier. Or they were
earlier.
Convicted of a felony,
right?
Or
those kinds of things. So basically, you're saying that retention will be in the rare case instead of for every judge. At the end of their term, right? So
okay, so let me boil this down another
sure.
way, right?
Yes,
so I'm based on all of the context you just giving me. If
right.
I'm understanding, judges currently, depending on if it's at an appellate level or at the Supreme Court level,
yeah.
they have 4 to 6 year terms.
That's
right?
exactly right.
and then they come up for re-election or retention, right?
That's right.
And they're placed on the ballot,
That's
right? And so if Prop 137 is passed, if you're
Right.
a yes vote,
Right.
you're basically saying that judges, once they've made their way onto the court through
Right.
merit,
Right.
right, stay on the court until they retire or unless a judge does something that is meritless, like is convicted of a felony or
Right.
files for bankruptcy or something like this, right? There's
That's
a number
exactly
of cases.
That's exactly right.
But this is essentially a lifetime achievement up to or lifetime retention up till 70, unless someone chooses to retire.
Right. So critics of this act say, look, it does a couple of things that are problematic. First, it is essentially scrapping, in the view of opponents, the system that's been in place, for the last 40 or 50 years in Arizona that has served Arizonans well, and instead of and removing what opponents of this act think is an important public accountability measure, that you ought to be able to have the opportunity to vote on these judges on a regular basis.
Right.
So that's exactly what it would do. It also, has a retroactivity clause to it, and it's an interesting piece in of itself. There are Supreme Court justices and other judges. There's a whole bunch. There's going to be, probably 40 or 50 judges on your ballot
That
if you're
are up for retention.
Yeah, if you're in Maricopa County, it's a big chunk of your ballot, and so it would, anybody who got unretained, right? Anyone who was in this election, if this measure passes, it would undo that result.
So if a judge was unretained in the 2024 general election,
Correct.
but Prop 137 passes,
Correct.
it's retroactive. So that means that the voters' will would not happen, right? Because it's retroactive. So if someone was not retained, a judge was not retained
Right.
by the people, the voters of Arizona,
Right.
because Prop 137 is retroactive,
Yeah.
the voters' will would not be what
Right. And
what the mandate is
and
if
the way
I'm understanding this.
That's exactly
Okay,
right.
okay.
Now, the way the proponents look at it is they say, look, what all that's doing is saying that the voters' will for Prop 137 would overcome their will on a particular judge. So from their point of view, it would be balancing two different outcomes from the voters, and you have to pick a way. Because either 137 passes and you don't make it retroactive, and then those judges who might not get retained are not being retained, despite the fact the policy going forward would be they wouldn't be, and they would argue that that's arbitrary, and so that's their argument.
Right, but I know some of the folks that are against this.
Yeah.
I know that there's some Supreme Court justices that are up, and
Yeah.
but in Arizona,
Yeah.
we were living under 1864 pre-statehood law for women's health care for a time here in the state, and so I think there's a rub there, right? Because that means that if Prop 137 passes,
Yes.
and I know some folks maybe don't make it through retention,
Right.
Then it seems like the will of the people is not actually being mandated. Why wouldn't they just write this proposition? I mean, you didn't write the proposition, but I'm curious why they wouldn't write this proposition to just start in 2024 and move on. It's interesting to me. The
Right.
retroactive piece is
Well, yeah, and I
pretty
think
fascinating.
I think the argument that proponents of the measure would make is that, look, either way you look at it, you have the possibility of essentially a split verdict between voters. That is to say, if it passes and some judges were
Not retained.
not retained,
Got it.
you would know that the voters like the idea of in the future them not being retained. They would argue that the arbitrariness is the same no matter where you put it, that it's no less arbitrary to make it prospective only than it is to make it retroactive, because you're still having a split result in terms of the voters, and that's what they're trying to resolve.
Okay. So this seemed pretty cut and dry to me, but there's some deep thought that has gone into this. But again, a yes vote means that because we have mandatory retirement for judges in the
Yeah.
state of Arizona at 70,
Yeah.
essentially this is a lifetime retention until 70 unless a judge does something that is meritless, right?
Right.
Like, again, is convicted of a felony or there's a list of things.
Right, and particularly the JPR, if they were reviewed badly for judicial performance, they would get sent to the ballot.
Got it. Yes vote That's the only way they would go to the ballot. A no vote means that we keep the current system that we have.
Yes.
And depending on where you're a judge, every 4 to 6 years, you are on the ballot for retention for
That's
another
correct.
4 to 6 year term. Okay. This makes all the sense. Thank you, Tom, for clearing that up for me.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, there's just that funny little nugget of the fact that this is retroactive that is, I find, so fascinating. We want to remind everyone that it's a super, super long ballot this year. So we're suggesting that you talk to your friends and family about this ballot initiative and everything that's on the ballot. Work your way up the ballot. And if you have any questions about who's on the ballot and other ballot initiatives, please visit us at yourvoteisyourvoice.com. Thank you, Tom Collins.
Thank you very much.
My name is Gabe Hagan. I am the co-founder of Brick Road Coffee here in Tempe. I believe it's important to vote because our rights are on the line. Visit yourvoteisyourvoice.com to register to vote and learn more about the upcoming election.